Today's scripture comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verses 5 through 12. Beside the pool was a man who had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw the man and realized he had been crippled for a long time, Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" The man answered, "Lord, I don't have anyone to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. I try to get in, but someone else always gets there first." Jesus told him, "Pick up your mat and walk." Right then the man was healed. He picked up his mat and started walking around. The day on which this happened was a Sabbath. When the Jewish leaders saw the man carrying his mat, they said to him, "This is the Sabbath. No one is allowed to carry a mat on the Sabbath." But he replied, "The man who healed me told me to pick up my mat and walk." They asked him, "Who is this man that told you to pick up your mat and walk?" Today's word is instigator. An instigator is a person who brings about or initiates something. Jesus was an instigator. He brought about and initiated a whole new understanding of God in which we seek to faithfully follow today. Jesus also lived in a way that initiated difficult conversations about what it really means to live and love God and God's creation faithfully. Now, some of you listening may have cringed a little at the word instigator. For many, it has negative connotations. A synonym is sometimes troublemaker. But as we have been reminded over the past year with the passing of Senator John Lewis, there is good trouble and there is bad trouble. But faithfully believing and following Jesus shows us that there are also ways in which to engage in good God trouble. And today's scripture in John is one of those stories where we can really wrestle with Jesus as an instigator. I mean, the rule had been placed for hundreds of years. No one works on the Sabbath. The man healed by Jesus did not have to be healed on the Sabbath. He had waited 38 years. If the physical healing was the primary part of the story that was most important, then that part of the story could have been done on another day. 38 years in one day. Instead of a day when hundreds of years of tradition and history was all of a sudden dismissed by an instigator, Jesus. I mean, we all know that timing is everything, and Jesus had a way in which to time his disruptive moments. He had a way in which to push on the flaws of the systems, the rules, those rules that were supposed to connect us and connect those who most need God to God. But over time, it actually created barriers between us and God and others. I mean, shouldn't the Pharisees have been happy that the man was healed? Shouldn't they have cared for him and his wellness? Did it really matter that it was on the Sabbath? argue for a moment that the Pharisees were right. I mean, in today's world, where we can barely get people to focus 1 hour a week on their faith and thus walk around with uninformed theology and unfaithful daily realities, maybe Jesus should have picked a different day. Maybe he should not have been an instigator. He should have kept that standard Sabbath. Or maybe the rule about Sabbath was limiting what actual Sabbath is supposed to be. The actions of a relationship and love that come from God through us to others. That relationship of love is not limited to human regulations. If the Pharisees had seemed to care maybe more about the healed person and less about the rule, then maybe a different relationship would have been established, where Jesus was not seen as a troublemaker, but Jesus could be seen by the Pharisees as the Messiah. I have to obviously state openly that my personality is an instigator. I can't help but tell the truth. I make people think about things they don't often want to think about it. Yet I do think that many of us who are faithful to Christ actually need to practice the spiritual discipline of instigating good God trouble. But the difficult part is there are always false prophets among us, and there are always both good and bad instigators. And for humans, for all of us, it is often hard to truly sort out which ones are actually living out the best ways to bring God's authentic and real love and relationship to the world. And we know as Christians through the parables and stories that everyone is our neighbor, but until everyone sees everyone else as a worthy neighbor and a child of God, then we were always and are still always trying to bring wholeness in a flawed system. I kept thinking about like the food coloring image. It only takes one drop, one person to flaw the system and create a need for selfish survival. And thus the system needs to have instigators like Jesus, like us, who say, it's not about you. My faith tells me that it's about us. It's about communion. It's about community. It's about him and her and they. And oh, look, it's even about the cute puppy. But the moment the cute puppy bites you hard, the system of neighborly trust is broken, and a large piece of connecting God to each other and self has been once again, like the murky water, contaminated, and thus sin and selfishness and confusion are all able to enter in, and it is very difficult to remove it. And it is impossible without God at the center. It is murky, and Jesus knows it. And he challenges those Pharisees in a way that says, you have a choice on how to choose to see and relate and engage with me. And they chose to label him troublemaker. Our country has lots of good and bad instigators. And because we are human, they're not easily categorized. We're all just people trying to figure out the best ways to move through these murky waters. But we have to try to make some informed and faithful decision. And so I know for me, the people I choose to follow are the ones that I see thinking about us, not just them. The ones who are fighting to give life and clarity and love to all people and creation, and those who are seeking healing for all, worthiness for all, justice for all, and the right to not be in fear of persecution or death because of something that defines you as other. I seek a world in which spiritual healing is more important than misinformation. Thus, healing requires more interdependence and less independence. So we must be good God instigators. We must acknowledge that at times the dogs will bite because there is fear. We must remind ourselves once again to not be afraid. We must seek for light in murky waters and give life and share clarity that comes with knowing and engaging with Christ. We must stir things up at times so things can change and shift. We must not be the ones to block others from knowing a better way and having a better relationship with God. So we change the narrative in ways that don't stop someone another moment from being able to walk and be healed. And so we seek ways in which we can help others pick up their mats, walk, and live. And then this must be the moment where, if this is what we truly say we are and define ourselves and want to do, we must continue to answer and respond to this question, the one that Jesus asked in today's scripture. Do we want to be healed? Do we want the world to be healed? After selecting this week's scripture, my colleague, Reverend Alan Dickin, used this same scripture in a response to what was happening in our country. He points out that while we often pray for healing, we don't really want to do the work to heal, because real healing is so hard. Reverend Dickin says this: we refuse to collectively name the diseases we are suffering from. How could we ever hope to heal from something if we don't acknowledge why we are ailing to begin with? How futile is it to pray for healing, then continue to indulge in the very behavior that makes us ill. Jesus named where healing needed to happen, both physically and spiritually. Can we do that? Can we follow the wisdom set forth by St. Augustine and pray as though everything depended on God and work as though everything depends on us? Or can we even live into a more modern day theologian, Mr. Rogers, who said, always look for the helpers, but then make sure that as people of faith, we are also helping. Make sure that we are not the Pharisees standing in the way. And if we are, continue to work to figure out ways to get out of the way. This is the question instigated by Jesus that we are still answering and responding to today. Do we want to be healed? And if you do, then you have to stir up the water, face the scary biting dogs, and most importantly, pick up your mat and move.